Have you ever been so completely betrayed that it felt like your whole world was a lie? My own son framed me, sent me to prison for 2 years for a crime I didn't commit, but what he didn't know was that from inside that cage, I was meticulously planning the day his world would burn to the ground. For 729 days, my entire universe was the size of this concrete box. And for 729 days, I used my thumbnail to scratch another line into the wall next to my cot. It was a ritual, a promise to myself. Tomorrow would be day 730. Tomorrow, I would walk out of this hellhole a free man. I took a deep breath, and the air tasted like rust and failure. Even at night, the Georgia humidity made this cell feel like an oven, clinging to my wrinkled uniform, the thin mattress, my skin. 2 years. It felt like a lifetime. Before this, I was Benjamin Ashford, founder of a $120 million company. I slept in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. Now, I was inmate 47239, a number, a ghost. But I'd learned something in here. Ghosts can be very, very dangerous. The memories always came for me in the dark. The courtroom, my son, Trevor, on the witness stand in his perfect suit, his face a mask of manufactured sorrow. "I love my father, Your Honor." His voice trembled just right. Oh, he'd practiced that. I was sure of it. But I cannot justify what he did. He pushed my wife down the stairs. She was pregnant. He killed my unborn child. Lies. Then came his wife, Scarlett, wheeled into the courtroom, a hand on her flat stomach, crocodile tears streaming down her face right on cue. "He screamed at me," she sobbed. "Then he pushed me. I felt my baby die inside me." Lies. Every single word. The truth? I had gone to Trevor's office that day to confront him. Not about his wife, but about the $2.7 million he had embezzled from my company. I had the proof. The documents. I was going to give him a chance to make it right, to be the man I thought I'd raised. I never touched her. Never even got close. She was standing at the top of the stairs, and I remember it in slow motion, the look she gave Trevor. A silent signal. And then she just let go. She threw herself backward, tumbling down the marble steps like a rag doll. The security cameras? Mysteriously malfunctioned. Of course. When the gavel struck, *guilty*, my world ended. I watched Trevor embrace Scarlett, and I saw the look in his eyes. Not grief. Not guilt. Just cold, triumphant calculation. He'd just eliminated the one person standing between him and a fortune. He froze my assets, claiming I was mentally unstable, so I couldn't even afford a decent lawyer. I was trapped. "Theo, you daydreaming again?" The voice cut through the memory. It was Henry, my cellmate, an old-timer with eyes that missed nothing. "Tomorrow you walk," he said, folding his uniform with practiced precision. "Most guys would be thanking Jesus. But you're too calm. Like a man heading to the grocery store, not walking out of hell." I gave him a small, empty smile. I walked to the cracked mirror and stared at the man looking back. The softness was gone, stripped away by 2 years of rage. My hair was grayer, my face harder. The fire inside me had burned away the fat, leaving something leaner, hungrier. I thought of my wife, Elizabeth, gone 3 years now. Cancer took her before she could see what our son became. Maybe that was a mercy. "The real hell isn't in here, Henry," I said softly, turning to face him. I let him see it all in my eyes. "The real hell is what I'm about to unleash out there. Because tomorrow, when I walk out of this cage, hell is following me." Henry just watched me, and in his sharp old eyes, I saw a flicker of something that looked like respect. I lay back on my cot, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Trevor and Scarlett would be waiting with their cameras, ready to play their part. The forgiving family, welcoming home the broken old man. But they had no idea. Patience is a weapon. And revenge is a dish I've been freezing for 729 days. And just as I was thinking that, the speakers crackled. Visitation hours. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Expensive shoes. My son was here. One last time. Of course he was. They sat me at the bolted-down table, my wrists cuffed. Trevor walked in, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, looking every bit the emperor of the empire he'd stolen. Scarlett followed, no wheelchair today, moving with a fluid grace that mocked the memory of her supposed injuries. "Father," Trevor said, the word tasting like poison. "You're looking well." I just stared at him, saying nothing, until he looked away. Scarlett slid a leather folder onto the table. "We need you to sign something, Benjamin," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "The audit for the company starts tomorrow." Trevor cut in. "There's a $4 million withdrawal from Mother's Trust that needs your biometric approval. We need to move it before the auditors see it." An audit. I leaned back, letting the chains clink. "How unfortunate for you." His jaw tightened. "Don't play games. Sign the papers. Tomorrow, you walk out of here with nothing. I've frozen every asset. You'll be a 73-year-old felon with nowhere to go." "Is that a threat, son?" "It's reality." Then the door opened again, and my daughter, Rebecca, walked in. The air went cold. She wore a severe black suit, her face a mask of ice. She didn't greet me, didn't even look at me with any warmth. She just stood beside Trevor, a stranger. "Dad," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "You should sign. It's for the best. Fighting this will only hurt you more." The words hit me harder than any of Trevor's threats. I searched her face for the little girl who used to beg for bedtime stories and found nothing. Just a cold, professional stranger. "See?" Trevor smirked. "Even Rebecca knows when to be practical." I looked at them. My son, my daughter-in-law, all of them arrayed against me. "No," I said, the word quiet but final. Trevor's face darkened. "Last chance, father. Sign, or you'll find out just how deep the hole I've dug for you really is." I savored the word. "Tomorrow, son," I said, leaning forward. You'll learn what real hell looks like. Because these last 2 years, this was my vacation. Tomorrow, the real work begins." For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Scarlett's eyes. Trevor snatched the papers, his face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this." "Oh, there will be regret." I nodded slowly. "Just not mine." They turned to leave, but Rebecca lingered. She looked at me, really looked at me for a split second, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Goodbye, Dad. Not see you tomorrow. Not good luck. Just goodbye." The word hung in the air like a final judgment. I watched her walk out, her back perfectly straight, and I replayed it in my mind. Her coldness, Trevor's desperation, and that final, loaded word. Goodbye. As if she was letting go of something. Or maybe she was saying goodbye to the person they thought she was. October sunlight felt like a blade as I walked through the prison gates. A guard handed me an envelope with my wedding ring and $12. "You're free to go, Ashford." Free. The word felt alien. Outside, a media circus was waiting. News vans, reporters, and right in the middle of it all, Trevor and Scarlett, putting on a show. He held a giant bouquet of roses, his face a mask of practiced remorse. "Dad," he called out for the cameras. "Welcome home. We're so glad this misunderstanding is behind us." Misunderstanding. He called 2 years of my life a misunderstanding. I just kept walking. "Dad, wait." He stepped in front of me, thrusting the roses forward. "Let's take you home." I walked right past him. I didn't even look at him. "Benjamin, please." Scarlett's voice cracked with fake emotion. Trevor grabbed my arm, his grip hard. His voice dropped to a hiss the cameras couldn't hear. "Get in the car. Now." I stopped, and I turned to face my son. "Let go," I said quietly, "or I will scream that I am being assaulted, and every camera here will eat it up." I saw the calculation in his eyes. The panic. He let go. And that's when it happened. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek as a panther, glided to a stop directly in front of me. The cameras all swiveled. A young man in a sharp suit got out, walked around, and opened the rear door for me. "Mr. Ashford," he said, his voice clear and professional. "Welcome back. We have much to discuss." I glanced at Trevor one last time. His face was a mess of confusion, shock, and dawning rage. The roses hung limply in his hand. "Who is that?" a reporter shouted. I didn't answer. I just slid into the buttery leather seat. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thud, sealing out the chaos. As we pulled away, I watched Trevor get swarmed by reporters, his perfect reunion collapsing into a nightmare of questions he couldn't answer. "Mr. Trevor Ashford," the driver said, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Your corporate accounts were frozen at 8 a.m. this morning." I leaned back against the headrest, the first real breath I'd taken in 2 years filling my lungs. "Good," I said softly. The Rolls-Royce carried me back toward my city, toward the empire I had built, and toward the war that was just beginning. "My name is Christopher Wade, sir," the driver continued. "I've been coordinating with your associates for the last 18 months. Everything is ready." "Associates?" "Yes, sir. Margaret Thompson is waiting. She has the files." He paused. "And one other thing arrived for you." Christopher took me to a penthouse suite at the St. Regis, with a view that stretched across the entire city. I stood in a marble shower. The water so hot it was almost painful, and I scrubbed away 730 days of prison grime. And for a moment, I let myself break. Silent tears mixed with the scalding water, my shoulders shaking with the weight of it all. Grief for my wife. Rage at my son. Then I took a breath, turned off the water, and put the armor back on. This was a time for war. I walked out to find Christopher and a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Ashford." "Margaret Thompson," she said, her handshake firm. "I've spent the last 18 months building your case." She laid out the files. Asset freezes, forensic audit requests, an emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday to have Trevor removed as CEO. "He's discovering that right about now," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "He discovered it 3 hours ago," Margaret corrected. "His assistant called 6 banks. His corporate cards, his personal accounts, everything is frozen. By order of the primary shareholder. You." She pushed another folder across the table. "The audit will find the embezzlement. Criminal charges will follow. He's finished." But then, she slid a small, plain envelope toward me. It was marked with a single, handwritten letter. R. My breath caught. I opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. The handwriting hit me like a physical blow. Asterisk 2 years of work. Everything you need. Trust Christopher. Trust Margaret. They're loyal. R. Asterisk. Rebecca. My daughter. The one who stood there yesterday, cold as ice, telling me to surrender. Unless, I whispered, looking up at Margaret. Unless it was an act, she finished. Mr. Ashford, whoever sent this had access to everything. Trevor's emails, his offshore accounts, the payoffs to the judge, the payment to the security company that malfunctioned. It's all here. 2 years of evidence, meticulously gathered. Rebecca. She hadn't abandoned me. She'd gone undercover. In her own family. Just then, Christopher's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a hint of a smile on his face. Trevor just tried to use his corporate Amex at Bones Restaurant. It was declined. He then tried his personal visa. Also declined. What's his cash position? I asked. Approximately $240, Margaret said without hesitation. In his wallet. The house, the cars, the clothes he's wearing. All of it belongs to the company. Or to you. From an emperor to a pauper with $240 to his name. I looked at the USB drive. At my daughter's handwriting. 2 years. What had that cost her? I want him charged, I said, my voice hard as steel. I want the world to see him for exactly what he is. But we proceed carefully. We don't blow Rebecca's cover. Not until the time is right. I turned to the window, looking out over the city that was once again mine. Somewhere out there, my son was sitting in a fancy restaurant, unable to pay his bill, his stolen world crumbling around him. The phone in my pocket rang. It was an unknown number, but I knew. "Hello, Trevor," I said. Silence on the other end. Then a choked, confused sound. "Enjoy your last supper," I said and hung up. The next morning, Trevor woke up in a cheap motel to a world on fire. Hashtag Justice for Benjamin was trending worldwide. Someone had leaked Scarlett's medical records. The ones from 2 days before the fall. The ones that proved the baby was already gone, lost to the dangerous diet pills she'd been taking. The internet was judge, jury, and executioner. The comments were brutal. She killed her own baby and framed an old man. Asterisk Trevor Ashford helped her. They both belong in prison. Asterisk. Asterisk that whole trial was a lie. He sat there and watched his own father get sent away. Asterisk. His phone rang off the hook. Fox News. He threw it against the wall. "What's wrong?" Scarlett asked, emerging from the bathroom. He just stared at her. "The medical records leaked," he said, his voice dead. "Everyone knows." The blood drained from her face. "You destroyed my father," he whispered. "You made me destroy my own father for a lie." "Don't you dare," she shrieked, her own mask of grief finally cracking into rage. "You wanted the company. You whined about it for years. I just gave you the excuse you were looking for. The desire to betray him? That was all you, Trevor."
And he knew she was right.
Outside, news vans were pulling into the motel parking lot. A few days later, I stood on the porch of my home.
My home.
Trevor and Scarlett were inside. I'd arrived with the police and an eviction notice. "You can't do this," Scarlett screamed. "This is our house." "This is my house," I said, my voice flat. "You were a guest who became a thief. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings. And nothing else." Just then, a black BMW pulled up. Rebecca. She walked right past Trevor, ignoring his desperate plea for help, and came straight to me. "Dad," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear.
"Please."
"He's still your son. Can't we handle this privately?" She was playing her part. I looked into her eyes and for a split second past the mask of cold neutrality. I saw it. The truth. The alliance. A flicker of solidarity. "I'm sorry, Trevor," she said, turning to him with an expression of perfect pity. "I tried. But you have to live with your choices." She got back in her car and drove away, leaving him shattered. They emerged with 3 suitcases. That's all they had left. As the iron gates of my estate closed, locking them out, Trevor's eyes met mine one last time. And I saw it. For the first time. Understanding. He finally understood what he had lost. The news vans swarmed them on the sidewalk. The story ends, for now, in a roach-infested motel room on the south side of the city. Trevor, sitting on a sagging mattress, counting the $240 he has left in the world. Scarlett comes out of the bathroom, crying. "I can't live like this, Trevor. I saw Roach." He looks up at the woman he destroyed his entire life for. And he feels nothing. Absolutely nothing. "Then leave," he says. "So I have to ask, was I right to go this far? Or is there a line you should never cross, even with family? Tell me what you think in the comments. I really want to know. Can you imagine a betrayal so deep, so twisted, that it sends your innocent father to prison, shatters your family, and turns your entire life into a lie? I lived it. And the worst part? The woman who orchestrated it all, my own wife, complained about roaches as our world collapsed around us. This isn't just my story, Benjamin Ashford's story. It's my daughter Rebecca's story. But it begins with my son, Trevor. In a cramped, humid motel room, the stench of desperation hung heavy. Scarlett, Trevor's wife, her face blotchy and red, was screaming at him. "How dare you?" she shrieked. Trevor, hollow-eyed, retorted. "How dare I? You lied about our baby. You sent my father to prison for a crime that never happened. You destroyed my entire family for money that's now gone. And you're complaining about roaches." Her voice went shrill. "I did it for us. You wanted that company. You talked constantly about your father never retiring, how he treated you like a child, how you deserved to run Pinnacle. I gave you what you wanted. Trevor just laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You gave me nothing. You lied. The baby was already dead. You killed it yourself with those damn diet pills. And you blamed my father because you were too weak to take what was yours. Scarlett screamed back. You would have waited forever, playing the dutiful son, never standing up to him. I did what you were too cowardly to do. The ugly truth hung in the suffocating air between them. Trevor stared at her then, truly looked at her for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman he'd thought he loved, the woman he'd chosen over his father, his family, over everything. She was a stranger. She had always been a stranger. Get out, he said, his voice quiet, dead. What? Get out. I can't look at you anymore. Scarlett's laugh was harsh, cruel. Where am I supposed to go? We have $240 and this motel room costs $50 a night. In 4 days, we'll both be on the street. I don't care. Just go. She grabbed her purse, what little makeup she had left, a few clothes she'd stuffed into a suitcase. You're pathetic. You know that? Your father is stronger than you'll ever be. At least he had the spine to fight back. The door slammed, leaving Trevor alone in the oppressive silence. He sank back onto the stained mattress, staring at the scattered bills. $240. Maybe less after Scarlett took her share. 4 days until eviction. No job. No prospects. No family. His phone lay on the nightstand, its screen cracked from when he'd thrown it days ago. He'd avoided this call, knowing the cost, knowing it was likely useless. But he had nowhere else. He picked it up, scrolled to her name, Rebecca. My little sister. The one person who might still care. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. Just as he was about to give up, a voice answered. Hello, Trevor. It was controlled. Professional. Cold. Gracie, he choked out, using the childhood nickname he hadn't dared utter in years. His voice cracked. Please, I'm begging you. I'm your brother. Talk to Dad. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him anything. I'll do anything. Please. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. Then, Rebecca's voice, sharp as a blade. You made your choice, Trevor. You chose Scarlett over Dad. You chose money over family. You sent our father to prison for 2 years because it was convenient for you. A beat. I didn't know about the miscarriage, but you knew he was innocent. Deep down, you knew Dad would never hurt anyone, let alone a pregnant woman. But you didn't care because the lie was convenient. It gave you what you wanted. Trevor's hand clenched around the phone. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But you're my sister. You're supposed to. I was your sister, Rebecca cut in. When you chose to destroy the only parent we had left. When you chose ambition over loyalty. When you chose to believe a woman you'd known for 3 years over a father who'd loved you for your entire life. Gracie, please. I have nothing. No money, no home. Nowhere to go. Scarlett just left. I'm alone. You're not alone, Trevor, she said, her voice softening, but not with warmth. With something colder, sadder. You have exactly what you gave Dad. A prison of your own making. The only difference is his had bars. Yours has roaches and a broken air conditioner. And the knowledge that you did this to yourself. But you're my little sister. I was your little sister, she repeated, before you betrayed everything our family stood for. Before you chose a liar over your own father. Before you proved that blood means nothing to you. I tried to warn you, Trevor. At the prison. At the house. I gave you chances to stop, to think, to choose differently. But you didn't. You chose this path. Now you have to walk it. Rebecca, wait. Goodbye, Trevor. The line went dead. Trevor sat there, phone still in hand, staring at the blank screen, the dial tone buzzing like insects in his ear. In the corner, Scarlett's makeup bag. She'd left it. Expensive cosmetics, brushes she'd bought with his father's money. Evidence of the life they'd stolen and lost. The bathroom faucet dripped steadily, each drop echoing in the suffocating silence. Asterisk drip. 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 Asterisk counting down to homelessness. To complete destitution. To whatever came next. He lay back on the stained mattress, staring at the water-damaged ceiling. And for the first time, he truly understood what he'd done. Not just to his father, but to himself, to his family, to everything my wife Elizabeth and I had built. He'd traded a legacy for a lie. An empire for a woman who'd just walked out. A father's love for $240 and 4 days until eviction. Outside, police sirens wailed. To Trevor, lying in that sweltering room with nothing and no one, they sounded like funeral bells. Tolling for the death of Trevor Ashford, heir to Pinnacle Industries. All that remained was wreckage. 1 week after that motel room disaster, I walked into the Pinnacle Industries boardroom. The same boardroom I built from nothing. The 45th floor of One Atlantic Center, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta. But the view that morning was anything but serene. I sat at the head of the table. I'd been wrongfully imprisoned for 2 years, and the moment I was free, I began reclaiming what was mine. The air was thick with tension. 8 board members, their faces grim, were waiting. Christopher Wade, my trusted lawyer, stood ready. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying the immense weight of my authority. Thank you for convening on such short notice. What you're about to see will explain everything. Christopher clicked a button. The wall-mounted screen blazed to life. The first slide hit like a punch to the gut. Revenue down 40%, operating debt up 200%, projected insolvency in 6 months. My voice was quiet, but it echoed with devastating finality. This is Pinnacle's current state. 2 years under my son's leadership. 2 years of what he called modernization and growth. 2 years of systematic destruction. The next slide showed dozens of bank transfers, highlighted in angry red. Recipient, Monroe Consulting LLC. Total transferred, $2.7 million. I explained, Monroe Consulting, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, supposedly for strategic services. I then turned to Christopher. Tell them who owns Monroe Consulting. Christopher's voice was precise, clear. Scarlett Monroe Ashford. Trevor Ashford's wife. The company was registered 3 days after Benjamin Ashford's conviction. Every transfer occurred while he was incarcerated and unable to oversee company finances. Patricia Williams, a longtime board member, leaned forward, her voice incredulous. $2.7 million embezzled through his wife's shell company? That's the conservative estimate, Christopher replied. We're still tracing additional transfers. Suddenly, the boardroom door slammed open. Everyone gasped. It was Trevor, but not the polished CEO we'd known.
He was a wreck.
Wrinkled, stained jeans, a t-shirt that had seen better days, unshaven, uncombed hair, eyes wild with desperation. This meeting is invalid, he bellowed, his voice cracking, too loud in the silent room. I'm still the legal CEO. You can't hold board meetings without me. I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn my chair. I simply looked at Trevor with a cold, hard assessment usually reserved for strangers. You're nothing, I said quietly. You're a thief who wore a suit for 2 years, but underneath, you were always nothing. I built this company. You destroyed it. Every number on that screen is your legacy, Trevor. Debt, loss, embezzlement. That's what you built. Trevor lurched forward, grabbing the edge of the conference table. You can't do this. I'm your son. My voice never rose, never wavered. You stopped being my son in a prison visitation room when you demanded I sign away $4 million. You're just Trevor now, a criminal about to face consequences. Christopher stepped forward, his voice firm with legal authority. Mr. Trevor Ashford, you are hereby notified that the United States Attorney's Office is preparing federal charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to retain counsel. Shut up, Trevor screamed. You're nobody. You're just his lawyer. I'm the lawyer with evidence of your crimes, Christopher calmly corrected. 2 years' worth. Every transfer. Every forged signature. Every lie. The color drained from Trevor's face. He looked around the table, searching for allies, for sympathy. He found nothing but cold, professional judgment. I slowly stood, placing both hands on the table. As the holder of 70% voting shares of Pinnacle Industries, I moved to remove Trevor Ashford from his position as CEO and terminate his employment for gross misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and criminal activity. Trevor's laugh was desperate, unhinged. 70%? You need 51%. That's standard. You can't remove me alone. I have 70%, I confirmed. But let's make this unanimous. Christopher, please invite our final board member. Trevor's face went blank. Final board member?
There are only 8 board seats.
They're all here. 9 seats, Trevor. I corrected. There have always been 9. One has simply been dormant for the past 2 years. Confusion rippled through the room. Patricia Williams frowned. Benjamin, the 9th seat was Elizabeth's. After she passed, we never filled it.
We didn't need to, I said.
It was already filled by Elizabeth's designated heir, per her trust and will. A seat held in reserve until the heir reached the age of 25 and met the experience qualifications outlined in the company bylaws. Trevor's eyes went wide. No, that's not possible. Rebecca is only, he stopped. I finished. Rebecca turned 25 last month and has been employed in the financial sector for 3 years, meeting all bylaw requirements. Christopher walked to the boardroom door and opened it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent room. Trevor turned, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, watching the door. I watched my son's face and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This precise moment was what justice looked like. The footsteps reached the doorway. Trevor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in 741 days, I thought perhaps the world could still be set right. Rebecca Ashford stepped through the doorway. She wore a crisp, immaculate white power suit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. A leather briefcase hung from her left hand. Every step was purposeful, measured, the click of her heels announcing her arrival like a drum beat. Trevor's face cycled through emotions, confusion, then desperate hope. Rebecca, thank God.
Tell them
This is insane. But Rebecca walked past him as if he were furniture. She didn't slow, didn't acknowledge him, didn't even glance in his direction. She moved to the empty 9th chair, the seat at my right hand, and sat with perfect posture, placing her briefcase on the table with a deliberate click. My voice carried across the boardroom, formal and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Rebecca Ashford, holder of 30% of Pinnacle Industries voting shares, inherited through Elizabeth Ashford's trust. The 9th and final board member. Trevor staggered backward like he'd been physically struck.
What?
30%? Mom's shares went to me, Rebecca said, her voice cold and professional. Mother's will was very specific, Trevor. You would inherit your portion only after proving yourself capable of ethical leadership. She paused, letting that sink in. You failed that test. The color drained from Trevor's face. But you were helping me. You stood beside me for 2 years. I documented everything, Rebecca interrupted. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged invoice, every lie you told, every crime you committed. Her hand went to her briefcase, extracting a thick folder. She slid it across the table to Christopher, who connected a USB drive to his laptop. The wall screen illuminated. Evidence log. October 2023 to October 2025. Compiled by Rebecca Ashford. When I stood in that prison visitation room, Rebecca continued, her voice steady despite the tremor I could see in her jaw, and called Dad unstable. When I attended your dinners with investors, when I smiled at Scarlett and played the supportive sister, I was gathering everything. The screen changed, bank records, wire transfers, email chains. Judge Charles Winters received $150,000 from Monroe Consulting LLC 3 days before Benjamin Ashford's trial. Rebecca's voice was flat. You bribed the judge, Trevor, $150,000 to ensure Dad's conviction. More slides. Bond Secure Tech Solutions received $50,000. Purpose: camera system malfunction. October 20th. Contact verified through email correspondence. You paid the security company to disable the cameras that would have proven Scarlett threw herself down those stairs. More slides. Shell companies. Forged signatures. Embezzlement trails leading through 6 different accounts. Trevor's mouth opened and closed. No sound. Rebecca, he finally whispered. You've been working with Dad this whole time? I've been working for justice, she corrected, her voice cracking slightly. For 2 years, I stood beside you and pretended to believe your lies. I ate dinner with Scarlett and smiled while she talked about the baby she'd killed herself. I watched you steal Dad's company, his money, his freedom, and I documented every single moment of it. She stood abruptly, hands braced on the table, finally looking directly at Trevor. Her eyes were dry, but furious. 2 years of suppressed rage, finally breaking through that perfect professional mask. Do you have any idea what that cost me? Her voice rose, no longer cold, no longer controlled. Pretending to be on your side. Pretending I didn't care that our father was rotting in a cell for a crime that never happened. I had to look him in the eye during visitation and tell him to sign away for $1 million. I had to watch him suffer and not show anything. Not one crack in my performance. Because if you suspected for 1 second, everything would have been lost. Rebecca, I'm your brother. You are my brother. She slammed her hand on the table. Several board members flinched. That person died the day you chose to believe Scarlett's lies over Dad's character. The day you decided money was worth more than family. The day you sent an innocent man to prison because it was convenient. Trevor took a step toward her, hand outstretched. I made a mistake. I know that now, but we're family. That has to mean something. It means nothing. Rebecca's voice broke, tears finally spilling over despite her attempts to maintain control. You had everything, Trevor. A father who built an empire and wanted to share it with you. A mother who loved you unconditionally. A sister who looked up to you. You had a legacy, a family, a future. But it wasn't enough. You couldn't wait. You couldn't be patient. You had to take it all right now, no matter who you destroyed. She wiped her eyes angrily, straightening her shoulders, rebuilding her composure brick by brick. I vote in favor of removing Trevor Ashford from his position as CEO and proceeding with criminal prosecution. My voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. All those in favor? 8 hands rose. Christopher's hand rose as well, though he wasn't a voting member. 9-0, I stated. The motion passes unanimously. Trevor Ashford is hereby removed from all positions within Pinnacle Industries, effective immediately. I pressed a button on the phone console. Security, please escort Mr. Ashford from the building. 2 security guards entered. Men Trevor had probably walked past 100 times without noticing. They approached him with professional neutrality. This can't be happening, Trevor whispered, looking around wildly. Rebecca, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. Rebecca had turned her chair toward the window, her back to him, shoulders trembling with suppressed sobs she wouldn't let him see. Rebecca. Trevor's voice cracked as the guards took his arms. Please. The boardroom door closed behind them, cutting off his desperate pleas. The silence that followed was profound. The board members quietly filed out, several casting sympathetic glances at Rebecca's rigid back. Christopher nodded to me and followed them out, closing the door. I slowly stood and walked to Rebecca's chair. I placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Her control shattered. She collapsed forward, face in her hands, and sobbed. Great, wrenching cries that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside. 2 years of maintaining perfect composure, of hiding every emotion, of playing a role that required her to betray everything she felt. All of it came pouring out in waves of grief, exhaustion, and overwhelming relief. I'm sorry, she gasped between sobs. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I pulled her up, wrapping my arms around her, holding her like I had when she was small and the world was simple. I know, sweetheart, I whispered, my own eyes wet. I always knew. 2 years, She choked out against my shoulder. 2 years of pretending I didn't love you. Of standing beside him and acting like you deserved what happened. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. You saved me, I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. You sacrificed everything. Your relationship with your brother, your peace of mind, 2 years of your life. You stood in that prison and played a role that must have killed you, and you did it perfectly. I hated myself, she whispered. Every time I saw you through that glass, every time I had to pretend. You are the bravest person I've ever known, I interrupted, pulling back to look at her tear-stained face. Braver than any soldier, any hero. You fought a war no one could see, and you won. Rebecca buried her face in my shoulder again, her whole body shaking. I missed you. I miss my dad. I'm here now, I said, my voice rough with emotion. And I'm never letting go again. We stood there in the empty boardroom, 45 stories above Atlanta. Father and daughter, finally reunited after 2 years of carefully orchestrated deception. The city spread out beneath us, indifferent to our pain, indifferent to our triumph. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Rebecca had come home. 3 days after the boardroom, Rebecca and I sat in my Regis penthouse as evening settled over Atlanta. The city lights stretched to the horizon, but neither of us noticed the view. Rebecca curled in an armchair, still looking exhausted despite 3 days of rest. The cost of 2 years maintaining that perfect mask showed in the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. I sat across from her, a glass of bourbon untouched on the table between us. I'd waited 3 days to ask, giving her time to recover, to breathe, to start healing. But now I needed to understand. Tell me, I said quietly. Everything. You did all of it. Rebecca looked down at her hands. Where do I start? The beginning. She took a breath. The first dinner, 3 weeks after you were convicted. Trevor invited me to celebrate his promotion to CEO. I sat there at that table, the same table where we used to have family dinners, and watched him and Scarlett mock you. Called you unstable. Said you'd always been difficult. I smiled. And I nodded. And I agreed. Her voice cracked. Then I went to the bathroom and cried until I threw up. I knew then that I couldn't fight them openly. Trevor controlled everything, the company, the lawyers, the narrative. So I decided to become invisible. The supportive sister who believed his lies. And I started documenting. Her eyes went distant with memory. 2 a.m, that's when I'd copy files. Trevor kept everything in his home office. I'd wait until he and Scarlett were asleep, then sneak in with a flash drive. One night, Scarlett came downstairs for water. I heard her footsteps and barely had time to hide the USB in my pocket. She stood in the hallway for 5 minutes while my heart tried to beat out of my chest. How did you get information to me? I asked. The flash drive Margaret received. Henry Miller, Rebecca said. Do you remember him? Your cellmate. My eyes widened. Henry was working for you? Retired private investigator, she continued. I hired him 6 months before your trial, when I knew something was wrong but couldn't prove it yet. He's 70 years old and has a record for securities fraud from 20 years ago. I paid him $50,000 to get arrested on a probation violation and request placement at Georgia State Prison. She met my eyes. He made sure he became your cellmate. Every message I sent, every update, every piece of evidence, it went through Henry. The day before your release, I sent him one final message through a guard we bribed. Tell him I love him. Tell him to trust what comes next. My God, I whispered, my throat tightening. The whole time he was my eyes and ears, making sure you were safe, passing encrypted messages. I thought I was alone in there. You were never alone, Dad. Not for one single day. The prison visitation, I said, remembering, when you told me to sign. Rebecca's face crumpled slightly. I practiced that speech for 2 weeks. In front of mirrors. In my car. Everywhere. I needed my voice to sound cold, convinced, like I'd completely given up on you. She wiped her eyes. But when I saw your face through that glass, saw how much I was hurting you, I almost broke. I wanted to scream that it was an act, that I was fighting for you. Instead, I said goodbye and walked away. Then I sat in my car for an hour and sobbed. I knew, I said quietly. Not consciously maybe, but something in the way you said goodbye. Not see you tomorrow. Just goodbye. Like you were saying goodbye to the pretense. Rebecca nodded. I was terrified you'd see through it. That Trevor would notice. That I'd slip for just 1 second and ruin everything. Marcus Brown, I mused. How did you find him? 3 months of investigation. Scarlett was careful, but not careful enough. She'd transfer money to a Portland account every month. Small amounts, but consistent. I hired another private investigator in Oregon, and he tracked it to Marcus Brown. Married to Scarlett for 8 years. They have a daughter, Lily. She's 6 years old. Rebecca's voice hardened. I flew to Portland, watched them at a park. Lily was on the swings, and Marcus was pushing her. Scarlett's real family. The one she was planning to return to after she stole everything from us. That's when I knew we had her completely. Bigamy, a federal crime. The perfect final piece. I leaned forward. Christopher Wade. How did he become involved? Rebecca's cheeks flushed slightly. I approached him 2 years ago, right after your conviction. He was already making a name for himself in corporate law. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered, explained what I was planning.
She paused.
He believed me. Took the case, knowing he might not get paid for years. Knowing it could damage his reputation if it failed. He just believed in doing the right thing. And now? I asked gently, noting the color still in her cheeks. Now he's where? Rebecca faltered, then met my eyes. There's something there. I don't know what yet, but he stood by me through everything. Never doubted. Never questioned. I smiled properly for the first time. He's a good man. He is. The door opened and Christopher himself entered, briefcase in hand. His expression serious. Sorry to interrupt. We need to discuss trial preparation. What's happened? I asked. Trevor's hired a lawyer, Christopher said. Public defender, but competent. They're building a defense strategy and it's… Christopher hesitated, glancing at Rebecca. They're going after Lineage. Rebecca went very still. Lineage. My voice was carefully neutral. They're investigating family relationships, trying to challenge Rebecca's inheritance, her board position, her evidence. Christopher set his briefcase down. They're looking for anything that might discredit her testimony or invalidate her shares. Rebecca's hands clenched in her lap. I saw the sudden tension, the flash of fear in her eyes before she masked it. Let them look, I said, watching my daughter carefully. Rebecca's inheritance is ironclad. Elizabeth's will was explicit. Of course, Christopher agreed, but his eyes were on Rebecca, too concerned. The room felt suddenly smaller, weighted with unspoken knowledge. I looked between them. My daughter's carefully controlled expression. Christopher's worried glance. There was something here, something Rebecca was afraid Trevor's lawyers would find, something about Lineage. 2 weeks after the boardroom, Christopher Wade's law office felt like a war room. Papers covered every surface, legal briefs stacked in towers, evidence boxes lined against the walls. Margaret Thompson sat at the conference table, reading glasses perched on her nose. Rebecca stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. Christopher entered carrying a folder, his expression grim. Trevor's legal team filed their motion this morning. They found the adoption records. Rebecca went absolutely still. My jaw tightened, but I stayed seated, watching my daughter's face drain of color. Margaret pulled out a document, her voice professional, but gentle. Adoption decree dated 26 years ago. Rebecca and Ashford, age 3. Biological parents deceased in a car accident 2 months prior. They're arguing, Christopher continued, that Rebecca has no legal standing as an heir because she's not a blood relative. They're claiming her shares should be invalidated and her testimony dismissed. Rebecca made a sound, half laugh, half sob. What if they're right? What if I lose you the company? Because I'm not. Because I'm not actually. Stop. I crossed to her in 3 strides. I don't care what any paper says. You are my daughter, more my daughter than Trevor ever was my son. But the shares, Mom's trust. Adoption grants full legal rights identical to biological children, Margaret interrupted firmly. This motion is desperate. They have nothing else. But they'll use it in court, Christopher said. They'll paint Rebecca as an opportunist who manipulated a grieving widower to steal an inheritance. Let them try, I said coldly. Rebecca turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. I've always felt like I had to prove myself, like I had to be better, work harder, to deserve being your daughter. I cupped her face in my hands. You have nothing to prove. You proved everything when you stood by me while my biological son destroyed me. Blood means nothing. Loyalty means everything. Margaret leaned forward. The jury needs to hear this. Not the legal argument. The emotional truth. Benjamin, you need to tell them about Rebecca. About what family really means. I guided Rebecca to a chair and sat beside her. 26 years ago, your mother and I had been trying to have children for 5 years. Every doctor, every treatment, nothing worked. Elizabeth was devastated. Rebecca listened, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I remember, she whispered, being silent, like my voice was locked inside. Elizabeth brought you home. You were so small, so scared. You wouldn't let anyone touch you except her. She'd hold you every night, singing lullabies. 6 months went by, not one word. My voice roughened with emotion. Then one morning, you looked at Elizabeth and said, Mama. Just that one word. Elizabeth cried for an hour. So did I. Rebecca was crying, too, now, silent tears tracking down her face. 6 months later, Elizabeth got pregnant. The doctors called it a miracle. After 5 years of trying, suddenly, she was carrying Trevor. We were overjoyed. But Rebecca, my hand found hers. You were already our daughter. Already loved. Already ours. Trevor's birth didn't change that. Trevor knew. Rebecca asked.
No.
Elizabeth wanted to wait until you were both adults. But she died before. My voice broke. She died, and I kept the secret because I thought it didn't matter. It doesn't, Rebecca said fiercely. You're my father. Mom was my mother. That's all that matters. Then why? I asked gently. Have you been carrying this fear? Rebecca looked down at our joined hands. Because deep down I always knew. Little things. No baby pictures before age 3. The way people said I looked like Mom, but never you. I knew, even though no one said it. And I thought, her voice broke, I thought maybe that's why Trevor got everything. Why he was groomed to run the company, while I was encouraged to find my own path. Because he was real family, and I was... You were loved, I interrupted fiercely. Every bit as much as he was. More because you deserved it. Trevor's failure wasn't about blood. It was about character. And your courage, your loyalty, your sacrifice? That wasn't about proving you belonged. That was about being who you are. Margaret cleared her throat. This is what the jury needs to hear. Not technicalities. This story. Christopher nodded. Trevor's lawyers think they've found a weapon. They don't realize they've handed us the narrative that will destroy their case. How? Rebecca asked. Because, Margaret said, they're going to argue that adoption doesn't count. That blood is all that matters. And then Benjamin is going to explain exactly what family means, what loyalty means. He's going to compare you, the adopted daughter who sacrificed 2 years to save him, to Trevor, the biological son who sent him to prison for money. Christopher added, they're walking into a trap of their own making. I stood, pacing. When do they plan to raise this? Opening arguments, Christopher said. They'll try to discredit Rebecca before she testifies. Then we address it head-on, I decided. No hiding, no shame. We own it completely. Rebecca's adoption becomes the centerpiece of our case. Proof that blood means nothing when weighed against character. I turned to my daughter. Are you ready? It's going to be public. Everyone will know. Rebecca stood, squaring her shoulders. I saw the warrior who'd fought in silence for 2 years. Let them know. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud to be your daughter. And if Trevor's lawyers want to make this about blood versus loyalty, then let's show them exactly what matters. Margaret smiled grimly. This is going to backfire spectacularly. Christopher gathered his papers. Trial starts in 1 week. We need to prepare Benjamin's testimony. Make it personal, emotional, undeniable. I looked at my daughter, the one who'd sacrificed everything, who'd stood beside me when my biological son had betrayed me, who'd proven that family was built on loyalty, not genetics. Then let's give them a lesson, I said, in what family really means. Trevor's lawyers had just made their fatal mistake. They tried to use adoption as a weapon, not realizing it was Benjamin's greatest strength. The contrast would be undeniable. The adopted daughter who'd given up 2 years of her life to save her father versus the biological son who'd sent that father to prison for money. Blood versus loyalty. Genetics versus character. And I knew exactly which side would win. 3 months after the boardroom meeting, January brought freezing rain to Atlanta. The Fulton County Courthouse steps were slick with ice, but that hadn't stopped the crowd. Rebecca and I climbed those steps hand in hand, cameras flashing like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, lost in the chaos. I kept my eyes forward, my grip steady. The district attorney had fast-tracked the case. With 2 years of documented evidence and intense public scrutiny, there was no reason to delay justice any longer. Inside, the courthouse was warm, but the atmosphere was cold. Christopher and Margaret waited in the hallway, briefcases full of evidence. Ready? Christopher asked. I looked at Rebecca, pale but composed in her navy suit, hair pulled back. She looked like Elizabeth had the day we'd met. Ready, I said. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists and observers who'd followed the story since my release. The gallery buzzed with whispers that fell silent when the bailiff called for order. Rebecca and I took seats in the front row behind the prosecution table. Christopher and Margaret sat beside us. Across the aisle, 2 public defenders shuffled papers, expressions grim. Then the side door opened and guards brought in the defendants. Trevor appeared first, in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He'd lost 20 pounds. Hair grown out and greasy, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He looked nothing like the competent CEO from 3 months ago. He shuffled to the defense table, chains rattling. Scarlett came next, also in orange, also cuffed. She'd aged years, face drawn, no makeup, hair in a lifeless ponytail. She sat at a separate defense table. Her lawyer had wisely severed her case, though both trials ran together. They didn't look at each other. I watched my son scan the courtroom, watched his eyes find us. Something flickered across Trevor's face. Shame, maybe. Then he looked away. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison entered, a black woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for efficiency. She was nothing like Judge Winters. No corruption, just law. She surveyed the courtroom and nodded to the prosecution. The state may proceed. The prosecutor stood. Jessica Smith, mid-40s, a track record of winning difficult cases. She approached the jury box. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice clear and strong. This case is about greed. A son who couldn't wait for his inheritance. A woman who saw opportunity and seized it with lies. A 71-year-old man who spent 2 years in prison for a crime he never committed. She gestured toward the defendants. They embezzled $2.7 million. They bribed a judge. They paid a security company to disable cameras that would have proven Scarlett threw herself down those stairs after her baby had already died from illegal diet pills. Several jurors' eyes widened. Benjamin Ashford lost 2 years of his life, Jessica continued. 2 years in a cell while his son stole his company and his son's wife planned to disappear to her real family. Her real husband. Her real child. Trevor's lawyer shot up. Objection. Inflammatory. Overruled. Judge Morrison said calmly. Opening arguments, counselor. You'll have your turn. Jessica continued. The evidence will show a conspiracy of breathtaking scope, and it will show the real hero. She turned toward Rebecca, an adopted daughter who sacrificed 2 years, going undercover to document every crime. I felt Rebecca's hand find mine, squeezing hard. Trevor's lawyer stood, a young man clearly overwhelmed. My client was deceived, manipulated by Scarlett Monroe. Trevor Ashford believed his father was guilty. He acted on greed. Someone muttered loud enough to carry. Judge Morrison's gavel came down. Order. The lawyer pressed on weakly. Furthermore, the evidence gathered by Rebecca Ashford is suspect. She's not even a blood relative. She was adopted. And her motives, my hands clenched. Rebecca's grip tightened on my arm. Don't, she whispered. Let them dig their own grave. Orchestrated this prosecution to secure an inheritance she has no legitimate claim to. Christopher stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying, not arguing. Sustained. Judge Morrison said sharply. Stick to facts or sit down. The lawyer deflated, finishing weakly before sitting. The first day proceeded with Christopher presenting the timeline, the audit, the shell companies, the embezzlement. Each piece methodical, undeniable. The jury watched with increasing attention. Several took notes. One woman kept glancing at Trevor with visible disgust. By adjournment, the foundation was laid. Outside on the courthouse steps, I paused for the press. Justice delayed, I said simply, is not justice denied. A reporter called out. How do you feel about your son? My jaw tightened. I feel nothing. That man is not my son. My son died 2 years ago when he chose money over family. In Christopher's car, Margaret reviewed notes. They'll attack Rebecca tomorrow. The adoption angle. They'll try to discredit her before she testifies. Let them try, Rebecca said, but her voice trembled. Christopher checked his phone. Development. Someone contacted me. Wants to testify. Who? I asked. Christopher handed me a business card. Marcus Brown. Portland, Oregon. Flying in tonight. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. Who's Marcus Brown? I asked, confused. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Scarlett's husband. Her real husband. The car went silent. He's testifying? Margaret asked. He insists, Christopher said. Saw the news coverage. Wants justice for his daughter. Lily. Rebecca whispered. She's only 6. I looked at the courthouse lights burning in windows where justice was being assembled. Marcus Brown was coming. The real husband. The real family. The final piece proving Scarlett's entire life with Trevor had been a calculated lie. When does he testify? I asked. Day 3, Christopher said. After Rebecca. The bomb was coming, and when it dropped, it would obliterate whatever defense they had left. Day 2 of the trial began with an attention so thick it felt like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Rebecca took the witness stand, wearing a navy suit, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the rail. I watched from my seat, every instinct screaming to protect her, knowing I couldn't. This was her fight now. The prosecutor, Jessica Smith, approached with a gentle expression. Ms. Ashford, please describe your relationship with your father. Rebecca's voice was steady despite her trembling hands. Benjamin is my father in every way that matters. He raised me, loved me, taught me right from wrong. When Trevor sent him to prison, I knew I couldn't fight openly, so I went undercover for 2 years. The jury leaned forward, captivated. I documented everything. Every fraudulent transaction. Every lie. I attended dinners with Trevor and Scarlett and smiled while they mocked my father. I pretended to believe Dad was guilty when I knew he was innocent. What was the hardest part? Jessica asked. Rebecca's eyes found mine. The prison visitation. Looking him in the eye and telling him to cooperate, to sign away $4 million. Knowing how much it would hurt him. Knowing he might think I'd betrayed him, too. Why did you do it? Because he's my father, Rebecca said simply. Family doesn't abandon family. It was the right thing to do. Jessica nodded. No further questions. Trevor's lawyer stood, young, nervous, but determined. Miss Ashford, Benjamin Ashford is not your biological father. Correct?
Correct.
I was adopted at age 3. So, you have no blood claim to the Ashford estate? Legally, I have. Answer: yes or no. Do you share DNA with Benjamin Ashford? Rebecca's voice hardened.
No.
No blood relation. Yet, you stand to inherit 30% of a company worth $120 million. The lawyer paced. Isn't it true that you orchestrated this entire prosecution to eliminate the biological son and claim an inheritance you have no right to? My hands clenched the armrest. Margaret's hand touched my arm, a warning. That's not, Rebecca began. You manipulated a grieving widower, played the role of beautiful daughter while plotting to destroy his real son. Objection. I shot to my feet, my voice thundering through the courtroom. That is a lie. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. Mr. Ashford, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt. Margaret pulled me back into my seat. Your turn is coming, she whispered urgently. The lawyer continued circling. He took you in out of pity. He took me in out of love, Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the theatrics. And I fought for him for 2 years, because that's what daughters do for their fathers. Real fathers, not biological coincidences. The lawyer blinked, his momentum broken. No further questions. Jessica stood for redirect. Rebecca, in your own words, why did you fight for Benjamin? Rebecca looked directly at the jury. Because family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who loves you when you're at your worst. Benjamin Ashford showed up for me when I was 3 years old and traumatized and silent. He's been showing up every day for 26 years. So when he needed me, I showed up for him. That's what family means. Thank you. No further questions. Judge Morrison nodded. The prosecution may call its next witness. Jessica Smith stood. The state calls Benjamin Ashford. I walked to the witness stand, sworn in, and took my seat. I looked at the jury. 12 faces watching me with varying degrees of curiosity and sympathy. Jessica approached. Mr. Ashford, tell us about Rebecca. I took a breath. This was the moment Margaret had prepared me for. The moment that would either cement our case or destroy it. Rebecca, I began, is the best thing that ever happened to my family. I looked at my daughter, saw her eyes already filling with tears, and continued. 26 years ago, Elizabeth and I had been trying to have children for 5 years. Every treatment failed. Elizabeth was heartbroken. We decided to adopt. The agency called about a little girl whose parents had died in a car accident. Drunk driver. She was 3 years old, and she hadn't spoken a single word since witnessing the crash. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Elizabeth brought her home. Rebecca was so small, so scared. She wouldn't let anyone touch her except Elizabeth. My wife would hold her every night, singing lullabies, reading stories. 6 months went by. Not one word. My voice roughened with emotion. Then one morning, Rebecca looked at Elizabeth and said, Mama. Just that one word. Elizabeth cried for an hour. So did I. Several jurors were already reaching for tissues. 6 months after that, Elizabeth got pregnant. The doctors called it a miracle. After 5 years of trying, suddenly she was carrying Trevor. We were overjoyed. I paused. But Rebecca was already our daughter. Already loved. Already ours. Trevor's birth didn't change that. I leaned forward, looking directly at the jury. For 26 years, Rebecca has been my daughter. Not my adopted daughter. My daughter. She graduated top of her class. Got her first job in New York. Called me every Sunday. When Elizabeth died, Rebecca flew home and held my hand through the funeral. She's been there for every moment that mattered. My voice grew stronger, harder. Trevor is my biological son. We shared DNA. And he sent me to prison for a crime I didn't commit. He stole my company, my home, my freedom. He chose money over family. He chose lies over loyalty. Rebecca doesn't share my DNA, but she sacrificed 2 years of her life to save me. She went undercover in her own family, documented crimes, gathered evidence, and stood by me when my biological son abandoned me. I stood, my hands gripping the witness box rail, and my voice filled the courtroom like thunder. So, don't you dare tell me that blood makes family. Loyalty makes family. Love makes family. Character makes family. Rebecca is more my daughter than Trevor ever was my son. And if this court cannot see that, if this jury cannot see that, then we have lost sight of what family really means. The silence that followed was absolute. I saw tears on several jurors' faces. Saw the woman in the back row openly crying. Saw Trevor with his head bowed, shoulders shaking. And saw Rebecca, tears streaming down her face, mouthing 2 words, "Thank you." Jessica Smith let the moment breathe before speaking. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Morrison looked at the defense table. Cross-examination. Trevor's lawyer stood, looked at my face, looked at the crying jurors, and made the smartest decision of his career. "No questions, Your Honor." The witness may step down. I returned to my seat. Rebecca grabbed my hand the moment I sat, squeezing so hard it hurt. Court adjourned for lunch. Outside, the press was already broadcasting my speech. Within an hour, clips were circulating everywhere. By evening, #ChosenFamily was trending nationwide with over 5 million mentions. Comments poured in. Asterisk, "This is what a real father looks like." Blood means nothing. Love means everything. I'm adopted, and this made me sob. This is everything. Trevor Ashford is a biological son. Rebecca Ashford is a real daughter. There is a difference. Asterisk. Christopher showed us his phone in the courthouse hallway. "Benjamin, you just went viral." That speech, it's everywhere. "I don't care about viral," I said, looking at Rebecca. "I care about her knowing the truth." "I've always known, Dad," Rebecca said softly. "But thank you for telling the world." Margaret approached, her expression serious despite the victory. "Tomorrow is day 3. Marcus Brown testifies. Are we ready for the final piece?" Christopher nodded. "He lands tonight. I'm meeting him at the hotel at 7 to prep." I looked at the courthouse behind us, at the windows where Trevor sat in a holding cell, at the world that was finally understanding what had really happened. "Then let's finish this," I said. The speech had gone viral. Public opinion had shifted entirely. And tomorrow, Marcus Brown would drop the final bomb that would destroy whatever remained of Scarlett's defense. Justice was no longer delayed. It was arriving right on schedule. Day 3 of the trial began with routine testimony about shell companies and financial fraud. The courtroom had settled into the rhythm of technical evidence when Jessica Smith stood. "Your Honor, the state has an additional witness. He arrived from Portland last night." Trevor's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. We weren't notified of any additional witnesses." "The witness came forward voluntarily after seeing news coverage," Jessica said. "His testimony is directly relevant to the charges of conspiracy and fraud." Judge Morrison considered. "I'll allow it, but Counselor, this is your last surprise." Jessica nodded. "The state calls Marcus Brown." The courtroom doors opened. A man walked in, Asian American, mid-30s, wearing a simple gray suit, his face exhausted and drawn. Behind him, a lawyer escorted a small girl, maybe 6 years old, dark hair and pigtails, into the gallery seats. Scarlett's face drained of every drop of blood. Her hands began to shake violently. Trevor looked confused. "Who is that?" Marcus took the witness stand and was sworn in. His eyes never left Scarlett, who had gone absolutely rigid in her seat. "Mr. Brown," Jessica began. "What is your relationship to the defendant, Scarlett Monroe?" Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. "She's my wife. We've been married for 8 years." The courtroom erupted. Trevor's head snapped toward Scarlett. "What?" Scarlett stared at the table, trembling, saying nothing. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. "Order. Order in this court." Jessica pulled out documents. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a marriage certificate dated 8 years ago, Portland, Oregon. Joint tax returns. And she held up a birth certificate. Birth certificate for Lily Smith, age 6. Mother, Scarlett Smith. The documents were passed to the jury. Several gasped audibly. Trevor sat frozen, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. Mr. Smith, Jessica continued, please tell the court about your marriage to Scarlett. Marcus took a shaky breath. We got married 8 years ago in Portland. She said her legal name was Scarlett Smith. We have a daughter, Lily. She's sitting right there. He gestured to the little girl in the gallery, who waved timidly. 3 years ago, Scarlett said she got a consulting job in Atlanta. Long-term contract. Good money. She'd come home once a month, sometimes less. I believed her. I trusted her. I loved her. His voice broke. I had no idea she was living another life, another marriage, another identity. Jessica displayed photographs on the courtroom screen, Scarlett and Marcus on their wedding day, both smiling. Scarlett holding baby Lily in a hospital. Family Christmas photos. A beach vacation. Birthday parties. A complete life documented in images. When did you discover the truth? Jessica asked. 2 weeks ago. I was watching the news and saw her face. My wife. Arrested. Married to another man. Accused of sending someone to prison. Marcus looked directly at Trevor. I had no idea Trevor Ashford existed. She told me she was working consulting. I was home raising our daughter alone, sending her money when she asked, believing every lie. Trevor whispered something inaudible, his face ashen. Mr. Smith, why did you come forward? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Because she destroyed 3 families. Mine, Trevor's, Benjamin's. For what? Money? Our daughter asks me every night when Mommy's coming home. What am I supposed to tell her? That Mommy's a liar? A criminal? That everything we thought was real was fake? In the gallery, little Lily had started crying softly. A victim advocate put an arm around her shoulders. Marcus turned to look at Scarlett directly. Lily drew you a picture last week. A family portrait. You, me, and her. She asked when you'd be back for her birthday. His voice hardened. You were never coming back, were you? You were going to take the money and disappear. Leave us both. Leave all of us with nothing. Scarlett was sobbing now, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Jessica approached the witness stand. Did you have any knowledge of the crimes Scarlett committed?
No. None.
I thought she was a consultant, a legitimate businesswoman. I had no idea she'd framed anyone, stolen anything, lied about, he stopped, about the pregnancy. I saw the trial coverage. She told Trevor she lost a baby. She had our baby 3 years ago. She killed another one with diet pills. How many lies can one person tell? No further questions. Judge Morrison looked at the defense table. Cross-examination. Scarlett's lawyer stood, took one look at Marcus's tear-stained face and the crying child in the gallery, and sat back down. No questions, Your Honor. Trevor's lawyer did the same. No questions. The witness may step down. Marcus walked past the defense table on his way out. Trevor's voice stopped him, barely above a whisper. Did she ever love me? Marcus looked at Trevor. This man who'd been as deceived as he had been, who destroyed his own father for a woman who'd never been real. I don't think, Marcus said quietly, she ever loved any of us. Just the money. He collected Lily from the gallery. As they walked toward the exit, the little girl turned back, her voice small and confused. Mommy. Scarlett's sobs grew louder. Judge Morrison called for recess. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushing for the doors. Spectators talking over each other. The jury sitting stunned. Trevor remained at the defense table, motionless, staring at nothing. Finally, he turned to Scarlett. His voice was dead hollow. Even our marriage was a lie. Everything. Every single thing. Trevor, please, Scarlett started. Don't. Trevor's voice was barely audible. Don't say anything. There's nothing left to say. He turned away from her, and that was it. The end of whatever they'd had. Whatever he'd thought they'd had. All of it revealed a fiction. Guards came to escort them back to holding cells.
Trevor walked like a zombie.
Scarlett could barely stand still, crying. Outside the courthouse, the news broke like a tidal wave. Asterisk bigamy bombshell. Scarlett Ashford had secret family in Portland. Husband and 6-year-old daughter testify. We thought she was working. Trevor Ashford discovers wife's 8-year marriage was a lie. Asterisk social media exploded. Within an hour, Marcus Brown's testimony was the top trending topic. Videos of little Lily crying mommy were going viral, breaking hearts across the country. Comments poured in. Asterisk that poor man. That poor child. Scarlett destroyed 3 families for money. Trevor is a criminal, but even I feel sorry for him. His entire marriage was fake. Lily asking mommy destroyed me. Asterisk. Inside Christopher's car, Rebecca was crying. That little girl, she didn't ask for any of this. But none of the children did, I said quietly, thinking of my own daughter, of the years she'd sacrificed, of the family that had been torn apart. Margaret reviewed her notes. That's it. Scarlett's defense is dead. The jury won't come back for her. And Trevor, she shook her head. Everything he thought was real just evaporated. Christopher's phone buzzed with notifications. The testimony is everywhere. Marcus Brown's question, for what money? That's the quote everyone's sharing. I looked back at the courthouse. Somewhere inside, my son sat in a holding cell, finally understanding the full scope of the lies he built his life on. Tomorrow is closing arguments, Margaret said. Then it goes to the jury. How long? Rebecca asked. With this much evidence, this much emotion. Margaret's expression was grim. Not long. Maybe a day. Maybe less. The bomb had dropped. Scarlett's lies were laid bare for the world to see. Trevor's last illusion had shattered into pieces. And somewhere in Portland, a 6-year-old girl was learning that her mother wasn't coming home. Not for her birthday. Not ever. Justice, I thought, sometimes destroyed innocent people on its way to the guilty, but it was still justice. And it was finally arriving. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours. I sat beside Rebecca, our hands clasped. Christopher and Margaret sat behind us. The gallery was packed. Journalists, observers, everyone who'd followed this story from the beginning. All rise. Judge Morrison entered and took her seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The jury foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. In the matter of the state versus Trevor Ashford, on the charge of embezzlement, how do you find? Guilty. Wire fraud? Guilty. Conspiracy to obstruct justice? Guilty. Bribery of a public official? Guilty. Trevor sat motionless. His eyes were empty, hollow. No reaction at all. Just nothing. In the matter of the state versus Scarlett Monroe Ashford, on the charge of conspiracy?
Guilty.
Obstruction of justice?
Guilty.
Perjury? Guilty. Bigamy? Guilty. Scarlett collapsed forward, sobbing. Judge Morrison let the verdicts hang before continuing. Mr. Trevor Ashford, please stand. Trevor stood slowly, like a man underwater. You sent an innocent man, your own father, to prison. You embezzled millions. You bribed a judge. Her voice was steel. I sentence you to 18 years in Georgia State Prison, with no parole for 12 years. Full restitution of $2.7 million. Trevor's head bowed. He said nothing. Miss Scarlett Monroe Ashford, please stand. Scarlett could barely stand, her lawyer helping her up. You orchestrated a conspiracy of breathtaking cruelty. You faked a pregnancy loss. You committed perjury. You maintained a bigamous marriage for years. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. Additionally, Marcus Brown has been granted full custody of Lily Smith. You are prohibited from any contact with your child until she reaches legal adulthood. No. Scarlett's voice broke. Please, my daughter. Your daughter will be better off without your influence, Judge Morrison said coldly. The child's welfare is paramount. Court officers removed the defendants. Trevor walked toward the exit without looking back. No glance at me. No acknowledgement. Just empty steps toward 18 years in the same prison where he'd sent his father. Scarlett was half-carried, still sobbing. Lily. I need to see Lily. But Lily wasn't there. Marcus had taken her home, to Portland the day before. One additional matter, Judge Morrison said. Judge Charles Winters will face a separate trial for judicial corruption. The courtroom erupted in applause. I sat motionless, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction. Just exhaustion. Rebecca's hand squeezed mine. Dad, it's over. That's when it hit me. 2 years and 741 days after being wrongly convicted, justice had finally arrived. I pulled Rebecca into my arms and cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. 2 years of rage and grief pouring out on the courthouse bench. It's over, she kept saying. Dad, it's over. Christopher and Margaret stepped back, giving us space. Outside on the courthouse steps, January's sun was blindingly bright. Cameras surrounded us. A reporter called out, Mr. Ashford, how do you feel? I took a breath. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it still hurts. That was my son. I raised him, loved him. That pain doesn't go away with the verdict. I pulled Rebecca close. But this woman, this daughter, she saved me. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty makes family. She proved that for 2 years. Rebecca's composure broke. 2 years of holding herself together came pouring out in great sobs on the courthouse steps, while cameras captured everything. 2 years, Dad, she choked out. 2 years pretending to hate you, scared it wouldn't work. You gave up everything, I said, my voice breaking. 2 years of your life for me. Because you're my father, Rebecca sobbed. Because family doesn't abandon family. Christopher created a buffer. That's enough. Give them space. Margaret ushered us toward the car. 1 week later, Rebecca sat on a park bench in Piedmont Park. The January cold bit through her coat, but she'd wanted neutral ground. She saw them approaching. Marcus Brown, walking hand in hand with Lily, who wore a pink winter coat. This meeting had been arranged through lawyers. Rebecca stood as they approached. Mr. Brown. Miss Ashford. Marcus's expression was guarded, but not hostile. Rebecca knelt to Lily's level. Hi, Lily. I'm Rebecca. The little girl looked at her with solemn eyes. You're the lady from TV, the one who helped catch my mommy. Rebecca's heart clenched. Yes, I am. I'm sorry about what happened to your mom. Daddy says Mommy did bad things, Lily said, her voice small. But I miss her. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. It's okay to miss her, sweetheart. She's still your mom. Will she come home? Not for a long time, Rebecca said gently. But your daddy loves you very much. Lily nodded seriously, then wandered away to examine a bird. Rebecca stood, facing Marcus. I can't fix what Scarlett did, but I want to help. She pulled out an envelope. I've established a trust fund for Lily's education. Full tuition through college, plus living expenses. It's anonymous, but she deserves a future that her mother's crimes can't destroy. Marcus stared at the envelope. Why would you do this? Because Lily is innocent, Rebecca said simply. She didn't choose any of this. She deserves every opportunity. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. That's incredibly kind. You're a good person, Rebecca Ashford. I'm just trying to do the right thing. They watched Lily chase the bird, her laughter bright and innocent. She's resilient, Marcus said. Kids are. She'll be okay. Rebecca said, she has a good father. That's what matters. Marcus called to Lily. Come on, sweetie. Time to go. Lily ran back, grabbed her father's hand, then waved at Rebecca. Bye. Rebecca waved back, watching them walk away, a small family trying to rebuild from wreckage. She sat back down on the bench, pulling her coat tighter. Justice had been served. Trevor and Scarlett would spend years in prison. I was free, vindicated. But there were still casualties, still wounds that wouldn't fully heal. Still one final confrontation left. Tomorrow, I would visit Georgia State Prison to say goodbye to my son. One last time. 1 year later, January again. I drove to Georgia State Prison full circle. I passed through the same gates where I'd been released 741 days ago. But this time, I wore an expensive suit, hair silver but healthy. This time, I was the free man. The visitation room was exactly as I remembered. Cold lights, bolted tables, the smell of disinfectant and despair. I sat facing the plexiglass divider. The door opened. Trevor shuffled in. Orange jumpsuit. Hands cuffed. He'd lost 30 pounds. Hair long and unkempt. Face gaunt. He looked 59, not 37. We sat in silence. Father and son. Prisoner and free man. Roles reversed. Trevor picked up the phone. I picked up mine. Dad. Trevor's voice was hoarse and raw. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. I'm sorry.
So sorry.
I was greedy.
Weak.
I destroyed everything. Trevor's eyes filled with tears. Scarlett manipulated me, but that's not an excuse. I knew you were innocent. Deep down I knew, but I didn't care.
Why?
I wanted it all right then.
Couldn't wait.
I thought I deserved it. I'm your son, right? Trevor's voice cracked. When Scarlett offered the plan, I agreed. I'm not a victim. I chose this. I nodded slowly. At least you're finally honest. Is there any chance you could forgive me? Ever? I pushed an envelope through the slot. Transfer documents. Pinnacle Industries. 100% ownership to Rebecca Eleanor Ashford. Effective 6 months ago. Trevor's hand froze. You gave her everything? 6 months ago. It's hers now.
CEO.
Majority shareholder. Everything. And me. I stood, looking down through the scratched plexiglass. You're no longer my son. Legally, emotionally, financially. You chose greed over family. You sent me to hell for 2 years. You'll serve 18. When you get out, you'll have nothing. No name. No legacy. No father. Dad, please. I'm not your father. Not anymore. Rebecca is my daughter. My only child. She stood by me. She sacrificed. She chose family when you chose betrayal. Blood means nothing. Loyalty means everything. And you have none. I turned toward the exit.
Dad.
Trevor's voice cracked, desperate. Please. I paused. The room held its breath. Would I turn back?
No.
I walked through the door. It closed with a clang of metal. I didn't look back. Outside, January sunlight was brilliant. I walked toward the parking lot, feeling lighter with every step. A black sedan waited. Rebecca leaned against it, smiling. Christopher Wade stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. She leaned into him naturally. I approached, smiling. So, it's official? Rebecca blushed. Dad, we're going to tell you. Christopher. I extended my hand. You planning to marry my daughter? Christopher's eyes widened. Sir, I should have asked. She's 30 years old. Doesn't need permission. Just needs my blessing. You going to treat her right every day? I will, sir. I promise. Christopher said firmly. Then you have my blessing. I pulled him into a brief hug. Take care of her. She saved my life. I will, sir. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. How did it go? It's done, I said simply. Completely done. Forever. Let's go home. We got into the car. Rebecca in front, me in back, Christopher driving. As we pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The gray prison walls grew smaller, then disappeared. The past finally buried. I watched Rebecca laugh at something Christopher said. Watched the way she touched his arm. This was family. Real family. Not blood. Not DNA. But loyalty. The prison vanished, and we headed toward Atlanta and the life we'd fought to reclaim. I looked at my daughter, the woman who'd saved me, who'd proven that family wasn't about genetics. Rebecca, I said quietly. She turned. Yes, Dad. Thank you for everything. For 2 years of sacrifice.
For choosing me.
For being my daughter. Rebecca's smile was radiant. There was never a choice, Dad. You're my father. That's all that matters. We drove in comfortable silence, heading home. Pinnacle Industries belonged to Rebecca now. She'd earned it through character, not blood. As the prison disappeared completely, I felt the last chain fall away. I was free,
Truly free.
and I had a daughter who deserved everything. This is my family story, a true story about a betrayal that nearly destroyed me. I'm Benjamin Ashford, 73 years old, and I'm sharing this so you don't make the mistakes I did. I trusted blood over character. I raised Trevor, gave him everything, and he repaid me with family betrayal. 2 years in prison for a crime I never committed. That's what blind trust and DNA cost me. But God had other plans. Through my darkest nights in that cell, I prayed, and God answered. Not with the son I'd lost, but with the daughter I'd always had. Rebecca, my adopted daughter, sacrificed 2 years, going undercover to save me. She proved that God doesn't measure family by blood, but by loyalty. Here's what I learned. 1. Don't assume biology equals loyalty. Trevor shared my DNA, but not my values. Rebecca shared my values, but not my DNA. Guess which one saved me. 2. Don't let greed poison your family. Trevor couldn't wait for his inheritance. That impatience cost him 18 years in prison and a father's love forever. 3. Don't ignore the warning signs. I saw Trevor's selfishness growing, but made excuses. Asterisk he's young. He'll mature. Asterisk no. Character doesn't change. It reveals itself. This story taught me that real family betrayal comes not from those who challenge you, but from those who destroy you for personal gain. And real family, the kind God intends, stands beside you when the world collapses. God gave me Rebecca when I thought I'd lost everything. He showed me that chosen family, built on faith and loyalty, is stronger than any bloodline. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between blood and loyalty? What does family truly mean to you? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.